Welcome friends, in this video we're going to continue talking about transactions, and this time we'll talk about save points and then rolling back a transaction. I'm not going to use any while loops in this example. Let's get going here. I'm going to say use my dbase, go, and remember the idea here is save points and rolling back transactions. So first of all, think about it in these simple terms. Imagine you come to me, I say write down 5 pieces of information. But for example, of those 5, maybe you write down 3, and then on top of it, one of them is wrong. So you should be able to reverse that operation in some fashion. Okay? That's the big idea here. So let's take a look at what I mean. I'm going to say following, so drop table temp. Remember, I'm typing that in case you already have it. I just want to make sure I can drop it easily. At the next stage here, create table temp. I will say here ID integer, comma, value float. So I'm making a simple table with 2 columns, one named ID, the other one named value. The data type here is integer, and the data type for that one is just float. Let's continue. And now we're going to go into the transaction business, and I'm not going to use any loops. I'm going to step through this very carefully using the debuggers so you can see the entire process step by step. So I will say this instead. Begin transaction, like that. And of course, the way we choose to define the transaction is up to us, but perhaps because we're just making a table here with the create table, we can stick some values into it. So I will say insert into temp and then values 1 comma space, like that. So of course this will simply insert into the temp table these values. So 1 is going to go into the ID field, and then that there is going to go into the float field. If you try to remove that and just do something like 1 comma nothing, not too much happening, so you get an error like that. Incorrect syntax. But if you try that, a pair of single quotes, that does work. All right, so let's continue now. So we've begun the transaction. We've inserted, say, 1 record into the table, and now we'll take a look at it inside. So we'll say select star from temp, and say we're happy with the results. So you can just save it at this point. So now you can type as follows. You can type literally save transaction like this, and then give it a name, so save point or something like that. All right, let me insert this code a little more, like that. So begin the transaction, insert a record into the table, display it with the select star from temp, and then just save it. And then imagine we've saved it up to this point, and now for example, we're not happy, or perhaps something has happened, and we're going to update the same record again, for example. So we can do that by typing as follows. I'll say update temp. So update, name of table to be updated, and say set value equal to rand. So I'm just going to take and stick a random value here into the value field. That's all. And remember, if you hover your mouse over rand, you see where it says returns float in the tooltip. Look at it carefully. Returns float. So up here, notice I also have value float. You see? I've got the data types matched. All right, and we're going to modify the record we have inserted. Remember, that record is this record up here. Right, that's the information that goes into the record. It's not much. It's just the ID and this thing that looks like, 2 single quotes put together. And the value there for ID is 1. So over here, when I do my update, I'm going to type where ID equals 1. That's it. So I'm just going to modify the first record after inserting it. Okay? And then to show that effect, I'm going to say select, say, star from temp. And lastly, so imagine we go through an entire process. We have inserted 1 record. We save the transaction up to that point. We then decide to update that record for whatever reason with an ID of 1. We look at it, and then perhaps we don't like it. So to reverse everything from the update forward, meaning this business right here, to reverse that, I can do this. I can type this. I will say roll back transaction and then save point. So this is going to roll back the transaction to the save point. All right, so here we are, and remember, what is all of this saying in simple English? Remember, it's saying this. You put down, for example, two pieces of information. You look at them carefully. First, you save them, and then you look at them again, and you say, okay, maybe that second piece of information is not quite correct. So you erase it and you update it, and then you think about it again, and you decide, no, what I put down originally was correct. So you reverse that stage, and you want to go back to the original pieces of information, you see? That's what this is saying in simple English. It's got to be something simple like that, right? Can't be anything more than fancy than that. All right, so the next stage, I want to run this in a debugger. Take a look. So just at the bottom of all of this, type the following here. Select and then star from temp. And make sure when you run it with the debugger, you highlight everything, including the bottom, to see the effect well. Okay, so debug step into. All right, so first we drop the table in case it exists. Good. Then we create the table back. Now we begin the transaction. So we insert the values there. And I want to show you something. Make sure on the bottom we see the panel that shows up. So insert the values and then select the values from the table. And notice that this one over here goes into the table as 1, but these single quotes go into the table as 0. Interesting. So I'm going to save the transaction up to this point. And now I say, okay, you know what? I don't like the fact that these single quotes, or obviously whatever other piece of information that could possibly be, depending on the context, change that. So I update it. So I'm going to hit that next here. So I've updated it, the value field that is, and I'm going to look at it again. And that's shown down below. You see that? Another record has an ID of 1, but the value has changed clearly from 0 to whatever that is. And lastly, I look at this new updated value and I say, you know, I really don't like that. I want to go back to the original. So I'm going to roll the transaction back to the save point. So I hit step into again. And now lastly, to confirm that I'm back at the save point, let's take a look. I'm going to select everything again. So hit select. And this will pop you out because the debugger session ends. But you still have the output panels on the bottom, so you can look through them. Take a look. So you've got the original inputs, 1 and 0. Then you've got the updated inputs, 1 and then whatever that number is. And then after the rollback of the transaction that reverses the update, you're back to 1, 0, which is the original set of data input. So all of this is confirming when you look at the little panel outputs that this actually is working as expected, in the sense that you can input data, you can save up to that point, you can reverse up to that point and get originals back. So this is all demonstrating the fact that you can control transactions at a very fine level using some basic keywords like save, rollback, commit, and begin, and so on. Okay, I am going to leave it here. Thank you, friends, and I'll see you in the next one.